Likutei Sichos, Chelik Yudches, Volume 18, the first Sicha for Parshas Behaloischa. This is a Rashi Sicha, which I believe is pretty easy to understand, albeit it's a somewhat of a longer Sicha. It has 13 chapters. However, we're going to learn the bulk of it. We're not going to get into the final part of it, which is actually a lengthy halachic discussion. Just a few points that's worth going over before we begin the Sicha. As the Sicha primarily speaks about the kindling of the menorah in the Mishkan and the Tabernacle and later in the Beis HaMikdash. So it's worth mentioning that technically speaking, without getting into details, but technically speaking, the kindling of the menorah could possibly be done by a non-Kohen, albeit not the entire lighting. The main lighting of menorah has to be, or at least the main candle has to be by a Kohen, as the Rebbe specifies in the Sicha. However, it could technically be done by a non-Kohen. Another point about the lighting of the menorah is that it's not only the kindling of the candles that was important, that was considered a service in the Beis HaMikdash. Rather, and as we say every morning in the pre-tefillah, in the pre-davening, as we do in the morning by the korbanos, we actually mention the fact of hathavas haneros, the preparing of the candles. And that was done in the morning. And while it was done, also they rekindled the candles, but that wasn't considered to be, as we'll see later, the main lighting of the candles. Another important rule, which is worth going over, and this is a general rule in the Torah, and that is something that Rashi mentions several times, Ein muktam u'me'uchar b'Torah. Literally translated, there is no earlier or later in the Torah, or meaning that there is no particular chronological order in the Torah, which means that the narratives that we read in the Torah, the storyline, doesn't necessarily mean that that's the chronological order in which it happened. In fact, there are many things that factually did not happen in the order they appear in the Torah. Rather, it's when Hashem dictated to Moshe what to write in the Torah and how to write it, he told him to write this first and this later and so on. And therefore, we have a rule that you cannot deduce from the order of the Torah that that's the fact, that that's the way it happened chronologically. Let's get into the actual Sicha. So in the previous Parsha, the last section of the Parsha discussed the Chanukas HaNesiim, which is the inaugural offerings of the Nesiim, the leaders of the tribes, the 12 tribes of Israel. Meaning that first there was 7 days of preparation, or we should say inaugural training, and then on the 8th day, which was Rosh Chodesh Nisan, that's when they officially inaugurated the tabernacle, and that's when the official service began, and that's when Aaron and his sons began to serve as Kohanim, as priests. Up to that point, it was Moshe who was training them, and he served as the high priest and the priest. Now, in our parsha, it begins with Hashem telling Moshe, say to your brother Aaron, Bahaloscha menorah, when you light up, when you bring up the menorah, and then he tells him that it has to be facing the west side and so on, the main candle, and he talks about in the next several verses about the lighting of the menorah. So Rashi quotes the word Bahaloscha, when you will light the menorah, and he says, Loma nismacha parshas ha-menorah the parshas ha-nesiim. Why is the parsha of menorah in juxtaposition to the parsha, to the story of the nesiim, of the leaders of the tribes, which I mentioned we had just completed in the previous parsha? Lefi, because shekeshara Aaron chanukas ha-nesiim, when Aaron saw the entire inauguration of the nesiim, how they inaugurated the tabernacle, chol sha'az daitoi, he felt very distressed. Why? Because he was not with them. He didn't partake in the inauguration of the Mishkan of the Tabernacle. Loihu v'loi shivta. Not he, and not nor his tribe. And he's the leader of the tribe. So Amar le HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So what the Torah is hinting here, and Rashi brings it from the Medrash, Hashem said to him, Chayecha, which literally means by your life, which is an expression of oath. I swear to you, Shelcha Gadol Mishalahem. Yours, meaning yours, Aaron, that you're lighting the menorah, Bahalos Chasaneros, is greater than theirs. Why? She'ata, because you, Madlik, you light, Umetiv, and you prepare as Haneros, the candles. That's what Rashi brings quotes from the Medrash. And that's why this is in juxtaposition to the previous parsha. Now, we know typically Rashi does not comment on the juxtaposition of parashios. It's not something that Rashi comments on, although many times in the Gemara and the Talmud it is discussed. So it's obvious that when Rashi does do so, it's because it's imperative for Pshutei Shel Mikra. It's imperative for the basic meaning and understanding of the verses. So the question is, why here? Why is it important here? What's the issue on Al Pi Pshutei Shel Mikra that warranted Rashi's comment and Rashi felt compelled to explain? So the answer is as follows. We mentioned that the inaugurative offerings of the tribes, being that they were 12 tribes, it took a duration of 12 days, meaning it began on the 1st of Nisan, and it went all the way through and including the 12th of Nisan. Now it's obvious, as I also mentioned previously, that since Aaron began de facto serving as the Kohen Gadol on the 1st of Nisan, because he began already to serve as the high priest on the 1st of Nisan, so it's clear and obvious that he began to light the candles, the menorah, then. Why then does Hashem tell him the commandment of lighting the candles? Why did he put it in the Torah here only after having completed a full 12 days of the inauguration, of the discussion of the inauguration of the leaders of the tribes? So, therefore, Rashi felt compelled to explain it, because the answer which we mentioned previously as a rule of Ein Muktan Mu'ucha B'Torah, that there's necessarily no chronological order to the Torah, that is true, but that is only used in a case where we don't know or we don't have an understanding as to a better reason why. But over here, Rashi says we do have an understanding. And this is the understanding, that Hashem intentionally had it written after having completing the narrative of the 12 days, consecutive days of inauguration of the korbanos, of the offerings of the Nesiim, of the leaders of the tribes, in order to point this out, that Hashem was hinting to Aaron, Hashem was telling Aaron, don't worry, yours is greater than them. However, we still have just several questions that need to be addressed. Number one, really, how indeed does this serve to quiet the distress, to lessen the distress of Aaron, the fact that he lit the menorah? How exactly does this play a role? The fact is that he did not have a part in those offerings, which were unique offerings and were just a one-time thing. They never reoccurred. Another thing, if it is so obvious, whatever the answer is here, and so self-understood, then what was Aaron's distress in the first place? And another question, which actually the Ramban asks, why did he, quote-unquote, comfort him? Why did he quiet his distress with telling him about the lighting of the menorah? Why not tell him that, look, you have something unique that no one else has, which is the offering of the Ketores, of the incense, or the chavitin, the minchas chavitin, a special meal offering, which is only done by the Kohen Gadol, or let's say even the special, unique offering that is exclusive, absolutely to the Kohen Gadol, namely the incense that is offered on Yom Kippur. Why did he specify this type of service, namely the kindling of the menorah? Now, moreover, if we think about it, who did the actual offering? Who actually put on the altar the korbanos, the above-mentioned korbanos of the 12 days, of the 12 tribes, of the 12 leaders of the tribes? It was Aaron and his sons. So why is Aaron so distressed? And another few points that need to be addressed. Why does Rashi use this expression from the Medrash, Chayecha, I swear to you? Why did Hashem have to use this strong language of an oath? And also, what's Rashi hinting with the words when he says that Hashem says to him, yours is greater than theirs because you kindle the menorah and you prepare the menorah? Why the preparation? Over here in the pasuk, in the verse, it doesn't mention anything about the preparation, and it seems that the Medrash throws it in. How does this enhance, the discussion here? How does this enhance the nechama, the comforting words of Hashem to Aaron? And the answer is as follows. Aaron was distressed about the fact, not that he wasn't involved in the service. He was involved in the service. But he was distressed by the fact that he did not partake in the Chanukas HaMizbeach, in the actual inauguration of the tabernacle, of the altar. He felt that just doing the service, just offering somebody else's offering, perhaps he felt maybe they actually had the greater part in the offering, namely the fact that they brought it. We know typically when a person brings an offering, when a person brings a korban, they don't get to offer it on the Mizbeach, on the altar. It's the Kohen who does it for them. But they get the credit, so to speak. It gets counted for them for whatever reason they're bringing the offering, whether it's a sin offering or a gift offering or an offering which is an obligatory offering such as the Korban Pesach, or let's say someone's coming for the pilgrimage to the Beis HaMikdash. They get the credit because they brought it. And that's where he felt that perhaps he wasn't part of it. He didn't merit, not he, not his tribe, to be part of it. And that's why Hashem answers him, you, She'atab, that you are the one who lights the candles. Hashem said to him, remember, they only brought it to the Beis HaMikdash, but they didn't get to complete it and fully offer it on the altar. Whereas your special inaugurative act, as we're going to see soon, the lighting of the candles, your unique action of your lighting of the candles for the very first time, which is the inauguration, you get to do it. You get to be the one to actually light those candles. So you do it from the beginning to end. However, perhaps one can still argue, like we said before, maybe it's just the bringing of the offering, the preparation, which makes up, so to speak, the bulk of the credit for having offered the offering, or in this case, having done the inauguration as it was by the leaders of the tribes. Therefore, Hashem says to him, you are the one who not only lights the candles, but Rashi throws in the word, you are also meitiv hasaneres. You get also to prepare the candles. You also get to prepare this, as I mentioned in the beginning, it's not only about the actual lighting of the candles that counts, but it's also a service in itself. Not just another part of the service, but it's a great service in itself to prepare the candles, to prepare them for lighting, and to make them ready for this special event. And furthermore, Hashem emphasizes and he says, Haneros, you get to light the candles. Why is he emphasizing the candles? Because there's something very unique about it. Hashem says to him, listen here. If you look at the offerings, consider the offerings of the 12 tribes, the inaugurative offerings, how, so to speak, how far did they reach? Where did they go? Where were they offered? They were only offered on the Mizbeach HaChitzon, on the outer altar, which is in the courtyard of the Mishkan, or later in the Beis HaMikdash, that would be in the greater hall of the Beis HaMikdash. Whereas the menorah is something which is already more pnimi, it's something which is more internal, something which comes closer, so to speak, to the holies. It's in the chamber, the most inner chamber of the Beis HaMikdash, right in front of the Holy of Holies. So you get to do something which is far more unique than whatever they were capable of doing, even if we should consider that their offering, their bringing of it, is what really carries the bulk of the merit. Now, why did Hashem have to say, Chayecha, I swear to you? Why did he have to emphasize it with that? Because it shouldn't just merely be that Hashem is saying, like, so to speak, kind of making an excuse, trying to make it nice for him to comfort him merely, but that it's not so. So Hashem says, no, I swear, this is the truth. This is the fact that indeed lighting the candles is a greater form of inauguration. Lighting the candles for the very first time is a greater form of Chanukas HaMishkan, the inauguration of the Mishkan, even greater than what they did by offering offerings, by bringing offerings. You did even greater by bringing the light in the inner holy chamber in which the menorah stands. Still, we're left with a question. As you remember, we asked in the beginning, so why didn't Aaron consider all of this? In other words, everything we just mentioned is obvious, or anybody that understands the intricate halachas, the laws of the lighting of the candles, should have understood this. So what was Aaron so distressed about? Why was he so concerned? The answer is that on the 8th day, some very unique things happen. That means the transition of power, so to speak, from Moshe, who served as the Kohen Gadol, who served as the high priest for the first 7+ days, as you'll hear in a moment, didn't actually happen from the night before, but it took place in the morning of the 8th day, meaning in the first day of the actual inauguration of the tabernacle, of the Mishkan. Thus, in the morning, Moshe had already prepared, and as I mentioned earlier, when you do the preparation, you also do a form of lighting of the menorah. So Aaron felt perhaps he missed the boat. Perhaps he'll never get the chance, even though he's going to light the menorah later that evening for the very first time. But perhaps you can argue the menorah was already lit, was already kindled once before, not by him. Thus, he was missing the chance and the opportunity forever to be part of the inauguration of the Mishkan. And that's why Hashem says to him, no, you have nothing to worry about. It's the kindling of the menorah in the evening that actually is what counts. And at least this is according to Rashi's way of learning, without getting into the lengthy discussion at the end of the Sikha, where the Rebbe discusses the Rambam's take on this and the Rambam's position, halachically speaking, which is considered to be the main part of the lighting and when you light the menorah and so on. But considering according to Rashi's point of view, in halachically speaking, the main part, meaning the ikar, the main lighting, is in the evening. So that's what Hashem was comforting him and telling him, don't worry. What Moshe did in the morning is insignificant. That's still part of the, so to speak, the preparation stage. That is still part of the training stage. What you're doing, Aaron, the lighting of the menorah in the evening, that is what counts. And I promise you, that is it. That's what counts. And now we can also understand why he didn't comfort him, so to speak, with the offering of the Ktoros. Because remember, the Ktoros of Yom Kippur is not going to happen for a very long time, for a good half a year. So that's no longer going to be an inauguration of the Mishkan. It might be an inauguration of the service of Yom Kippur, but he will still not be comforted with not having been part of the inauguration of the actual tabernacle for the very first time. Or even the Ktoros, the daily Ktoros, the daily offering of the incense. As we know, the daily offering of the incense had two parts, one in the morning and one in the evening. And they were connected. In other words, it was really one whole, and the Torah says to split it and to serve, quote, half in the morning and half of it at night, in the evening. Thus, by Moshe having done so already in the morning, he already took the opportunity away from being the inaugurative service through the incense, through the Ktoros. And therefore Hashem did not comfort him with that. Rather, he comforted him with the lighting of the menorah. And that explains the whole thing. And as I said, pretty easy to understand, very, very logical Rashi, very logically, very logical to accept and to really understand.